Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we're back in today's part 2, and we're talking about how to overcome. I'm not really comfortable with the word overcome.
Deal with, help out, be of service.
How to coach.
That's better.
How to coach your clients to move past their fear of not having a house to move to, thus the reason they're not listing their house. In other words, how do you overcome, there's that word again, but let's just, use real words, right? How do you overcome the objection? I would happily list my house with you and I'd happily sell, but I have no place to move to. So yesterday we covered the first 4 points, and today we're picking up on point number 5. I want to give you guys a quick reminder. We are doing 50 meetups around the country. And the next one, we're doing one pretty much every month. So make sure that you attend your local meetup. Go to harrisrealestatemeetup.com, harrisrealestatemeetup.com. There's also a link below in the show description. Remember, today's notes are down below. So as Julie and I are reading along in her notes, you're also going to see the links to go to harrisrealestatemeetup.com. And what is a Harris Real Estate Meetup? It is a group of agents, mostly podcast fans, coaching clients, a lot of folks from our eXp Realty family who are meeting up, who are sharing best practices, ideas, and sharing their enthusiasm for, frankly, this real estate market, because a lot of you guys are finally realizing that indeed this is the best market we've had for agents that have a skill set to succeed in this market. What worked in the past market, it's still working to some extent, but the reality of it is the agents that are adapting to the new skill set are thriving beyond their dreams. And we love hearing all the great feedback from all of you who are doing so well. You're really realizing that, the way forward for all of you is to move your mindset away from anything that even remotely resembles scarcity and realizing the abundance that a market like this creates. There is undoubtedly a lot. There's there's a bit of a dark cloud over, it seems like, most people nowadays. You got to move past that. And one of the best ways to do it is network with other agents that are also, breathing the same air that you are. They're podcast listeners, they're coaching clients, they're people in our eXp Realty group. And so definitely attend a Harris meetup. So go to harrisrealestatemeetup.com or click the link below. So Julie, let's roll into point number 5.
Yes, we're dealing with it is an objection. What's the definition of an objection? An unanswered question in the mind of your prospect. I would sell, I would list with you, but where am I going to go? We did 1 through 4 yesterday. Starting on number 5, consider keeping the old house. Turn it into a rental, at least for now, and proceed to find and purchase the next home. You can handle the lease yourself or refer it to your favorite leasing agent. The home stays an asset for your client, and they can keep their low interest rate mortgage, or maybe the house is actually paid off. Don't assume that this is not an option. You have to ask. It's an option because it is one of the reasons we don't have more inventory, because people are doing this. Remember that Americans currently have record high credit scores. They may be more comfortable taking this option than you think. In some markets, keeping the home and turning it into a short-term rental can be very profitable. We talked about that a little bit yesterday with regards to maybe making it into a vacation rental, or it might be a normal rental. This could be the best option for your clients, at least in the short term, and then decide what to do with it after a 6-month lease or a year-long lease. The house will still be there, and guess what? It's going to be worth more.
Well, so the obvious challenges with something like that is if the house is worth, some markets, like when Julie and I were moving out of Austin, our property would have been a terrible rental property. It would have required too much maintenance. It probably would have, for it to even pen out, the payment would have been too much. But guess what happened? After we moved, that house increased in value by like 50%. Should we have kept it? Yes, we should have.
We should have been able to figure that out.
We should have been able to figure it out. We should have been able to suck it up buttercup with kind of the, crappy cash flow. The house was paid off, but we should have, been willing to, that type of thing. Yeah. So you got to remember, any asset, any real estate right now, pretty much, is going to be the winning lottery ticket because of inflation. And the inflation and the lack of supply is going to do nothing but drive up home values. The least amount of appreciation inflation that I've read that people are predicting nationally, if there is such a thing, is 6% this year. Many of your markets are going to experience increases in value closer to 10%. I know it sounds crazy, but that is called supply and demand, and it is called inflation. And, oh yeah, by the way, the rates are going down.
That's exactly right. Okay. Point number 6, consider selling the home first, but leasing it back to the buyer for a set amount of time. This is where your seller stays in the house and leases back to the buyer. The buyer is the new owner. This allows your client to find their next home. The buyer is happy because they secured the house, and your seller's happy because they have both the time and the money coming in to facilitate their move to the next place.
And that actually might be a preferred, obviously it benefits the seller in that case, but it actually might be a really great option for the buyer because maybe the buyer has a house to sell and maybe they want some breathing room before they put their house for sale. So you never know. And again, you have to know these different options and you're going to have to present them to your client, but then also in some cases, you're going to have to explain those to these different options to the co-ops. Inexperienced agents that frankly aren't in a coaching program like ours are definitely going to be at a disadvantage because they're not going to know how to put deals together. So don't be surprised, coaching clients, if you're having to work both sides of the deal. That happens all the time in a market like this where you're going to have to actually frankly, coach the other agent how to actually explain to their, let's say it's your listing, how to explain to their buyer really what these different options are. You're going to have to do extra work in a market like this where there's such a massive skills deficit. Or frankly, you should refer them to our coaching program and we'll do the work for you.
Well put. That's an option as well. Okay, so number 7 option. I can't believe when I was typing this, I'm like, really? And then I thought to how many times coaching clients have told me that they'd use this option. And I was also thinking about you and I personally know 2 couples that before they moved to Puerto Rico did this. So what is this weird option? Well, previously weird. Consider this little known but much utilized possibility. Buying an RV. Some of your clients already have one. A houseboat or a sailboat. We have many examples from our coaching clients who have shared with about their sellers who cashed out their homes and simply bought something like this and just decided to travel for a while. You might be surprised that it's not just baby boomers or retirees who are doing this. The couples that I'm thinking about are both in their 30s that did this for 2 years before moving here.
And yes, AJ Maida, we're talking about you.
That's right. And Bliss and Roy did that too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that. Another version of this is for sellers to cash out and rent a series of short-term rentals in different areas of the country or the world, trying out new possibilities before they decide where to land.
That'd be my move.
Yes. And in fact, I had a coaching client tell me a little twist to this. She was working with somebody who found a new construction subdivision that had not been developed yet, but had the lots platted out, like there's roads and utilities, but nothing built. And the builder in their deed restrictions said, if you buy a lot in here, I will let you park your RV for up to 2 years without making you build. Most deed restrictions say you've got to build once you own the lot. And had the utilities set up. So, he's making a little bit of money before he builds anything, and he's giving people some options. So
our cabin in North Carolina, that's how it works.
Yeah.
But I'll say there's something else too. I don't know if, let me make sure I'm not going to read one of your future points. Nope. But here's an option too. Maybe they're thinking about moving to, like, let's say they're in South Carolina and they've always wanted to be on the coast, right? Or maybe they're, someplace like where we're from, Ohio, and they've always wanted to live in Florida or something. Well, maybe they should go ahead and buy the place down there that they were going to eventually buy. Obviously, we're talking about people that have flexibility. They're going to work remotely probably. These are going to be knowledge type workers or whatever. So adjust accordingly. So they could then buy that, retirement place or whatever and live in that and then rent it out. And how about this? Why not consider selling them something that they don't want as a long-term house to live in, but might make for a good rental long-term? So let's say, for example, you've got somebody that's in this scenario. Let's say they're selling a house for, $1 million, right? And they're going to move up to something, let's say, for $2 million. But they don't necessarily have a place to go. They're worried. Well, what if they were to go and buy a rental for say $300,000 or $400,000, live in that rental while they're trying to find something else? You get it? Then they keep the rental as an asset, and then they can obviously then move up. And then, you guys can help them, lease the properties out. And maybe they realize that owning real estate's a really home run idea in an economy like this, and they end up buying more from you as well.
That's right. You make me think about, in this half point here, is only a buyer side, but I am seeing a lot of this amongst first-time buyers, millennial crowd, people that can't find what they really want. A lot of these guys are living in really nice apartments right now, places like Seattle and Austin and Miami. And so what our smart coaching clients are doing is talking to them about, hey, maybe your first investment isn't actually what you're going to live in, Or maybe it's something that you're going to live in for a couple of years and you can keep it and turn it into a rental, or you can build equity and then buy something later.
You're saying they're paying so much for rent, they might, and because it's the fancy place with the club and all the rest of it,
Yes.
they might as well go and spend that same money on a mortgage payment on a property that they wouldn't necessarily want to live in, but it'll make a great first property for their investment portfolio.
Right, and then they build equity, and then they can buy what they really, really want. Right?
Yeah,
because
that
some of
makes
these
sense.
luxury apartments, they kind of get spoiled. Right?
Well, but ultimately, it's moving people away. Yeah, I love what you just said because it moves people away from if you show them that. Can you imagine you sitting in front of a prospective buyer and explain to them, yes, I know you have this beautiful condo, apartment situation with pools and all the rest of it, but here's the deal. You're going to live in there for 2 or 3 years. Here's this much money as you're going to spend, and here's what you're going to have to show for it after 2 or 3 years. What if you buy a property? It obviously doesn't have all the fancy amenities that the apartment complex does, but what if you buy that and now let's just see what that thing is worth in 3 years and the amount that's going to increase your net worth over 3 years. How about 10 years? How about 20 years? It'll probably, you guys get it. You show somebody, if you sell somebody a $300,000 property and it increases in value by 10% per year, obviously we're not, who knows, right? But if you were to do that and you were to pen it out and you're to show them how much it's going to be worth in 10 years, you're looking at an asset that's going to basically double in value. That is something when you show it to folks and they realize that this is a great way for them to actually create real abundance in their lives, real wealth in their lives, you're going to all of a sudden have elevated yourself way above the agent with 1,000 people that follow them on TikTok. You guys get it? You've just earned the right to be that person's real estate professional for life because you've shown them something else, something that no one else has, or something they didn't even possibly conceive of. Can you imagine how much they're going to love you forever because, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you've helped them to become multimillionaires just from that one little idea?
From that one conversation where you got away from, and I hear this especially from clients that like Austin would be a good example. They're living in one of the downtown high rises, lots of great amenities, and they've got a decent lease payment, right? But then they go and look at what you can buy in Austin for like $400,000, $500,000. They're like, yuck, that's old. I don't want to rehab it. I don't want to live there. It's not my neighborhood, whatever. Well, okay, so you buy that, you turn it into a rental, you turn it into a short-term, you have a different conversation than, yeah, I know that's not as nice as your apartment.
Think about what you said. So when people say, I can't find something, things are too expensive, it's because what you want, you can't afford. So what if you were to have said, I want all the things I see on HGTV? Well, you can't afford that. That's just, so what you should do is buy something you could afford, and then 2 or 3 or 5 years from now, you can, maybe even get something nicer than what you originally were looking at. Mm-hmm. People have got to get back into the reality of how expensive things are, but you know what? Real estate has always been expensive. I'm going to tell you guys something we were sharing with Orlando Montiel yesterday when we were in Miami. He didn't know about Sears houses. And I want you to think about what I'm telling you. So I grew up in a Sears house. Julie and I were selling lots of Sears houses. What's a Sears house? Some of you don't know that there was something called the Sears and Roebuck catalog. Now, what the Sears and Roebuck catalog was basically Amazon in the form of a catalog. I mean, you could buy everything from dog food to guess what? Homes. And so after World War II, you were, as essentially a veteran, VA was buying and financing land for, lots for people to buy. So based on your rank, I grew up in a neighborhood called Colonial Hills. Based on your rank in the military, that would determine the size of the lot you were able to buy or something along those lines.
And the type of house that you had to choose from too.
Well, that came to the finances. Yeah. So then what you do is you go to the Sears and Roebuck catalog, and I'm not making this up. Google it yourself. It's hilarious. And then you'd find the house that you wanted to buy in the catalog, and then they would deliver that house to the local, it would arrive on a train. Sometimes it would be trucked off the train, but for the most part, you would then have to go to the train tracks with your buddy with the truck and maybe 10 other trucks, and you'd then have to haul all the, wood and the windows back to your lot, and then guess what? You and your buddies would build the house.
It's a house kit.
It's a house, but it was all the raw materials, and you would then build the house, and that is how. Now, I want you to really think about what I just said. That sounds like an absolute shit ton of work for your first home, doesn't it? I mean, that's real work. What people are having to put up with now, is they just don't want to sacrifice luxury. You like that, Tyann? They just don't want to They don't want to sacrifice having community amenities. They want a gym with 5 cappuccino machines and 3 pools and a cold plunge, right? That's the standard that they have decided for themselves, where they're going to piss away all of those potential years of appreciation because they weren't willing to like sacrifice, air quotes, to buy something that was reasonably a price for them where they could build up equity. Now, so when people are expressing their disdain for the hardships of current real estate prices, I want you to kind of remember what I just said. There are going to be exceptions. There are going to be markets that are frankly just way over, what a first-time home buyer can buy, and that's the reason renting becomes a real viable alternative. But just do adjust your when you're pre-qualifying buyers. One of the things we teach you guys to do in our coaching program is really kind of take them through these, like I just told you guys a story. Take them through the mental, emotional process of really making an informed decision, so they don't lose out on the amazing appreciation cycle that we're going to be in. Well, really, inflation cycle we're going to be in for homeowners, for asset owners.
Well, I love when you coach them by using stories that they can then use with real conversations. Because when you tell a story, you're not making it about them. You're taking them out of their own mindset and ego, and then you're making them consider something else. So that's part number one. Part number two, I never considered. I wonder why why there's a railroad tracks that go through Colonial Hills. It probably had to do with where they were building it because of I never put all that together.
Do you remember that guy when our first house was 280 East Jeffrey? It's a house Julie and I bought for $70 grand. Yeah. No, 71,575.
71,575.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe I remember that. All right. So that was the first real estate deal we did.
The payment was $550 a month.
We were 22 and 23. So there was, this was a Sears house, and it was tiny, 750 square feet.
726.
Right. All right. So there was a guy that lived down the way who had Paul, right?
Yeah.
Paul was this guy at the time, I bet you he was in his early 80s. Mm-hmm. And he would walk this gnarly boxer, right, every day.
Yeah, bark at our dog through the fence.
Bark at our dog through the fence, and he thought that was the funniest thing ever. But he was a World War II veteran. He'd also bring Julie flowers too, which was really nice. Yep. But he was a World War II veteran, and we got to know all about, like, obviously getting to know him was a real blessing. He's since passed away, but he built his own damn house. That's the reason I'm telling you this. He had lived in that house since the 1940s. Up until,
he was the original owner,
Until like probably 20 years ago.
Yep.
So that's kind of a fascinating thing, how much people were willing to actually, what we consider hardships now, even like one generation ago, trust me when I tell you, no hardships. How many of you guys are Julie and I's age, where you grew up in the 80s and the 90s, where you were like, we walked past a kid's playground today that was on sand, and on top of the sand were these foam pads, okay? And the place at itself looked like something that you can only dream of. And there were no sharp edges. There were no sharp edges everywhere.
There will be no injuries there.
There would be no injuries. And if the little darlings happen to fall off, their little darling butts are going to bounce off not just the sand, but the 3-inch pad that's on top of it. I mean, the whole thing's ridiculous. You and I were, on jungle gyms where basically the game was to see how many times you could cut your hands.
I still have scars on my knees from falling down on the asphalt.
A lot of people I know are relating to what we're saying.
I know. Well, but as you were talking about sacrifice and giving something up to have something else, really, by not making that investment, even if it's in something that you're not in love with, the real sacrifice is 2 or 3 years later. You're still, if you don't do that and you don't build equity, you think prices are going to be more or less? Is your problem going to get better or worse? You may be a lifelong renter, which for some people that's fine. I'm not, against that. But you have to consider what the real sacrifice is the building of wealth. I keep on going back to, I wish I could remember, I'm sure this is published several places, but the amount of net worth somebody who owns a home, and they weren't talking about millions and millions of dollars worth of homes, but a home at all, compared to somebody that rents, is like 32 times as much.
So Julie and I are products of the early 70s. That's, so if you look at what real estate costs in the early 70s, when people were buying, when the interest rates were a hell of a lot higher, think about that. I mean, my mom and my dad bought this house in Worthington, Ohio, and it cost, I don't remember how much. And that house now is worth 6, 7x what they paid for it. Now you're saying, well, that's a shitty investment because if they would have put it in the S&P 500, you can't live in the S&P 500.
Right. It's not the same.
And yeah, it's not the same. So again, you're going to have to move people past this idea. It's almost a politicized thing. Real estate's too expensive. All the young people are getting screwed. They're never going to be able to buy homes. The American dream is never to buy real estate. I have news for all of you guys. People have said that before. People love to talk like that when there's times like this. I don't really know why. It's because I think maybe for the lot, and I read this other article, Julie, that a lot of millennials are taking themselves out of the housing market because real estate is just too expensive, and they're blowing all their money on luxury travel. And that's the reason, like when you and I were traveling, every airport had ridiculous lines.
Yes.
Hotels right now, especially expensive
Super
ones,
booked.
are raising their prices.
Yeah.
It's because younger people are spending a lot of money on luxury items that previous generations didn't. You guys understanding what we're going at here? So raise your children so they have the idea that you do indeed have to sacrifice before you get what you really want in life.
That would be called normal.
Yeah.
In normal times, right? I like how you're recalibrating that because I think people have gotten away from that, So back to I would list with you, but where am I going to go? Option number 8, consider finding your would-be seller an off-market home to purchase where that seller has flexibility. A lot of our coaching clients have become absolute masters at this. I'm so proud of them for putting together deals. I call this matchmaking, right?
I'm going to have Michigan Matt on the podcast.
Oh, good.
I'm going to interview him, and he's absolutely the master of this. Where exactly what Julie just said. He'll have a buyer that wants to live in a specific neighborhood. He goes out and door knocks. He finds a house where the seller was going to put the house for sale sometime in the future, but here's a buyer at their doorstep. They might as well go ahead and think about it now.
You mean he's super proactive about it?
He's super proactive, and you've got coaching clients like that. The people that we know that are making really the most money are the ones that are not waiting. They're being urgent. They're being proactively generators. They're getting off their butts. They're going out and doing the real work of real estate, and they're getting true benefits.
Exactly. So the advantages of this, again, find them something that's off market because they won't have to compete. The advantages are that you actually are in complete control of both sides of the transaction, and you may pick up yet another client when the off market seller also needs to buy. Refer to our podcast series and Housing Wire articles we've done about how to find inventory that's not in the MLS. I should put this higher on the list actually, because this is right up there with building, which was our first point, because I like the control of this. I like that the client doesn't have to compete for the inventory. I like that bounces you into the next transaction. It's good for the agent. It's good for the buyer, the seller. You can work out time frames. You can do lease backs. You can do all kinds of things. I've seen this combined with seller financing. There's all sorts of versions of this. But the point is that just because it's not in the MLS doesn't mean it's not for sale. Okay, so number 9, some of your seller prospects, and I see this especially in the upper end, some of your seller prospects may be ready to move into an assisted living care facility. Many of the homes that are coming onto the market right now are in 55 and over communities or in luxury communities, very developed communities. They could be downsizing, empty nester homes, and the like.
I find that insulting.
I know. We're not there
55
yet.
and older. We're not there yet, but
I
come
know.
on now.
I know. Are you prospecting those neighborhoods? Again, I hear about this a lot from coaching clients because one of the things that our Harris certified coaches always ask is, after saying congratulations on that next new listing, where did it come from? So you're sourcing what is working. I think we did a podcast a couple months ago.
Of course we did.
Well, of course we did. Where our sourcing of the listings that are coming on, where people aren't saying, well, I am not going to break up with my low rate or whatever. This is a big category right now.
Well, so drill down on what Julie just said. So you're going to go to the assistant living places. You're going to find out if maybe that's a good fit for your prospective buyer, but also that assistant living person might actually have somebody who's moving into the assistant living place that also has a property to sell.
Exactly.
There's a listing lead for you. Julie, we talked endlessly on this podcast in our coaching program about new construction. Mm-hmm. Go to the new construction folks. Same question. Be proactive. If all you're doing is waiting around the MLS for something to pop up, you're going to make zero money.
0. That's not good, right? Bad. Okay, number 10. Last but not least, it might not be for everyone, but it is certainly an option. Moving in with relatives, whether that's moving in with parents or moving in with kids or cousins or somewhere else or across the country, it could be a short-term solution. That's on there because I'm hearing it so much from coaching clients, because I always like to see, like when one of my clients says, oh, I just took a new listing, I always ask, what happens to that seller? Where are they going next? Well, they're moving in with their kids. They're moving in with their parents.
Bonus point number 11, I'm going to combine two of Julie's points. What if you have aging relatives. What if you were, if they're going to have to go to some assisted living place, or you can see on the near horizon, there's going to be an issue with that person. What if instead of moving off to an assisted living place, which by the way, if they have a home or any assets, that assisted living place is going to take all of that money. I mean, that's how it works. They're going to go in there and explore all that. Anyway, long story short, if they have some equity, let's say it's mom and dad, and let's say their house is, worth $500,000. They have no mortgage on it. And let's say you were to, put your money together with their money, and you were then to buy a house that was significantly larger than where you're living. So all these families could start living in a larger home together. Mm-hmm. You could start think like that. I mean, that's a very creative way for, frankly, many of you to get into what might be the upper end in your real estate, in your marketplace, and then, have a more expanded family. All of this is complex. Hopefully you like your relatives, and this is a viable option. And for those of you who have not considered that, you're welcome.
Well, even if you don't really like them, maybe you have a casita. Maybe you have a guest house on the property.
Or
right?
maybe you buy a really, really big house and you learn to lock doors.
Exactly. So, but it's interesting because that should be on here. And that is a feature that we saw during COVID, how many, families were combining households. So what's the bottom line? You cannot just wait around for listings to magically appear for your seller prospects who have to buy. Stop relying on your drip system. Be proactive with different solutions that could work for them. You'll have more transactions, and they'll value your expertise, netting you both current business as well as future repeat and referrals. So for more help, added accountability, a community of motivated agents and coaches, join Premier Coaching today so that you're going to hear these stories. This is not just going to be an abstract concept. You're going to hear people on the semi-private calls that say, the coaches are celebrating with them. Oh, you're not going to believe how I put this transaction together. I found this house for that person, then that person became a listing, and then I took them to new construction, and then I got the relationship with the builder, and blah, 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 right?
That's right. So Premier Coaching is free for the first 30 days. Scroll down below, click the link to join Premier Coaching, or you can simply go to premiercoaching.com. In the meantime, thank you for keeping this the number one listened to daily podcast for real estate professionals. It is our obsession to make you guys the best versions of yourselves as realtors. So please do consider joining Premier Coaching. And thank you for being podcast fans. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk to you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.